from a more lateral view. But if I diagram the genioglossus into the tongue, and I'll use Joe's nice purple pen here. So it has its origin from the genu, hence the word genioglossus. So this is the mandible cut in half right in the middle. So I've labeled it the genu, or the bend of the tongue. And so the genioglossus forms the bulk of the tongue as this fan-shaped structure. All right, so all of that is genioglossus. It functions to protrude the tongue, to stick it out. So if someone is testing your hypoglossal nerve, they'll ask you to stick your tongue out. If it's paralyzed on one side, your tongue will deviate to that side because it's not balanced by the pressure, and it will move it to the other side. Okay? So this is the Miley Cyrus muscle. It's going to take her a while to live that tongue out. All right. The other muscle is identified as the styloglossus, or the next one we're going to look at. And styloglossus comes down from the styloid process. So notice it has its origin above as well as posterior to the tongue. So styloid process, and we bring in the styloglossus. So it blends into the back of the tongue here. And because it's coming from above, it's able to pull the tongue up superior and to pull it back posterior. This is what we do when we swallow. All right, so when you're chewing some crackers or a piece of bread and you go to swallow it, you push it towards the back of your throat using the styloglossus muscle. I'm going to write it on this side here. And then from the hyoid bone, we have not the entire hyoid, but the last third, the last half of the hyoid is going to give off muscles that are start out slightly lateral. So what you see right here, and insert again to the posterior half of the tongue. And this will lower the back of the tongue as well as stabilize it. So we have this muscle right here, known as the hyoglossus. You're going to start to want to say hypoglossus. That's the nerve. Okay, the muscle is hyoglossus, or hyoid bone. So we have this model back here of the tongue. Again, on your head models, you can see the sagittal view. But for this model, see the lateral, the styloglossus has been cut here, so you're not seeing it coming all the way from the styloid process, but you can see that it's coming from behind. It's coming from behind and above. You can cut that out, Phil. It's coming from behind and above and blending into the tongue itself here. Okay, so styloglossus. And then as you look at the posterior lateral aspect right here, this is hyoglossus. Okay. Another model that we have to view some of these muscles on is that shorter. There's like 4 torsos back here. Not the really big ones, but the smaller torso. And you look at it laterally. So this view right here, you can see the styloglossus as well. Some of the muscles of the floor that are of the mouth that are demonstrated up there. So you might want to bring the camera back later during lab and show those. Okay? So genioglossus, styloglossus, and hyoglossus are known as the extrinsic muscles of the tongue. They all in the glossus, they all move the tongue, and they're all innervated by the hypoglossal nerve.
Nice.
And again, pay attention to where these muscles have their origin and insertion, where they are in relationship to the joint, and that helps you recognize, like the temporalis, whether it pulls the mandible back or up or type of thing. All right, now we're going to look at the region of muscles. Here's the hyoid bone again, and we're going to look at the region of muscles between the hyoid and the mandible. All right, these muscles are filling in this region right here and are identified as suprahyoid, or muscles above the hyoid. And then we'll look next at infrahyoid, or muscles that are found below the hyoid bone. So these are the suprahyoid muscles right here. Typically, they function to lift the hyoid so if someone is swallowing. Now obviously I don't have enough saliva now that I want to swallow to be able to swallow. But when you swallow, the voice boxes or larynx is pulled up so that the epiglottis can come down and cover the larynx and prevent food from moving into your airway rather than into your esophagus. So these muscles that have their origin on the mandible and the mastoid process will pull the hyoid bone up. If we fixate the hyoid bone, they will lower the mandible. So on page 15, all of them where they say elevates the hyoid, lowers the mandible, depresses the mandible, that's all the same thing. It just depends on whether the hyoid is allowed to move or the mandible is allowed to move. So if I hold my hyoid steady, don't allow it to move with muscles below it, and now put my thumb on my mandible. All right, now try to push your jaw downward and push up with your thumb. Feel how those tighten in this area? All right, so that's reversing origin insertion. That's making the hyoid the origin and the mandible the insertion. So you're pulling the mandible down. If you have the mandible the origin and the hyoid the insertion, it will lift the hyoid. So again, it depends on which bone we make stable. This is an easier view to understand the muscles. I'm going to come back to it after we've already identified them. But I'm going to diagram it from this view. All right? So I'm going to draw the angle of the mandible and label those structures. So I'll leave the tongue up here for now. And we'll draw in so this would be the angle. This would be the genu. And here we would have the hyoid bone. Right. Now the first muscle I'm going to draw is actually the deepest or the most superior. So this gets a little confusing if you don't follow along. No. We're now going to switch views. These are all Netter's diagrams, by the way. We're now going to switch views and look inside the mouth. So this is a view looking inside the mouth with the tongue removed. We're sitting, just above the tongue. And so the most superior muscle here, these two thin strips, are coming from the mandible to hyoid and back and forth. We can't see them from this view. This is not that same muscle. The muscle that I just showed you would be behind the screen. Okay? So I'm going to draw from this view, but with these muscles all gone, I'm going to draw this muscle. We can also see it from this view of the tongue. So here's our genioglossus. Here is the geniohyoid. Okay? So I'll draw it here, and then I'll add it to this diagram over here. So there are two pairs of muscles immediate to the midline. I like that orange. I thought it would be real pastel. I'll try not to use too much of it. So this is it's only about as wide as my little finger, right at the midline. Okay? So we're going to see it here, just next to the genioglossus, where it's attached to the hyoid bone. So that is also geniohyoid. Genu to hyoid. Okay? And it would be this muscle right here. So genioglossus goes from the genu to the tongue. Geniohyoid is going to go from the genu to the hyoid bone. All right, so look on your head models and see if you can find it. It's just below genioglossus. And it's about 1/4 inch wide. Okay? So now we're going to look at the very thin one that's just between the skin and the geniohyoid. So it's the most inferior of the muscles. It's this one right here. Okay? So here's our geniohyoid, and now we're going to draw the mylohyoid. So it's a much broader muscle. It actually forms the widest, so it can be what you call the floor of the mouth. And if we go to this view, it's this muscle right here. All right, so I'm going to draw that one in next. So I use blue. It also has a raphe, that mid-seam line. And its fibers are oriented in this direction. Almost looks like a wide feather. So it is covering up the geniohyoid. So it would be skin, and then I'd see mylohyoid, and then I'd have to remove the mylohyoid to see the geniohyoid behind it. So all of this is mylohyoid. That one, if I ask, which of the following muscles forms the floor of the mouth, it's going to be this one, because it's the broadest. Now there are two muscles that share the name digastric. They really are not two heads of the same muscle. One's innervated by the facial nerve, one's innervated by the trigeminal nerve. You can see them here in the diagram that's on the screen, at least part of it. So here's the posterior belly of the digastric, and here's the, right here actually, and right here is the anterior belly. If you look at this view, it's a little easier. So here's the mastoid process, and this comes down, passes through a little tendon like the superior oblique, but instead of a tendon continuing, we have the other muscle, which is the anterior belly. So both of them together can pull up the hyoid. All right, so I'll draw it on here and on this one. Let's see. Green. So coming from the mastoid process, coming down to the hyoid, we have the posterior belly of the digastric. And that's the left side. I want to put in another. This is a different head. This is not a head with two mastoid processes. Okay. So digastric, you can either call it posterior digastric or posterior belly of the digastric, and same here. Then the anterior, this passes over under a little pulley, and then the anterior belly would be the most inferior of these muscles. So we get anterior belly and posterior belly of the digastric. If you turn your head models upside down, so you can look on the chin region, you'll see a little bit of the mylohyoid, and you'll see the anterior belly of the digastric. You can also see the posterior, but it's kind of scrunched in there, and I would never tag it in that area. It's just not very clear. The posterior belly of the digastric, you guys remember what cranial nerve passes through the stylomastoid foramen? It says 5 major branches across the face. Facial nerve. Okay? So this is innervated by the facial nerve. whereas the anterior belly is innervated by trigeminal. Similar to our chewing muscles. Alright, so if I put in the mylohyoid here, it's going to look like this. We have genioglossus, geniohyoid, and mylohyoid from a sagittal view. So again, if we look at this view here, let me turn the lights off. So the very most inferior one is mylohyoid. Then we would have geniohyoid, and then we have genioglossus in all of this. All right. Now there's one more hyoid, and then I'll let you take pictures. This one is known as the stylohyoid. So it's going to have its origin from the stylo process. So here we have the styloglossus going into the tongue, and we're going to have the stylohyoid coming down to the hyoid bone. It actually splits here to go around the masseter. Okay? Not the masseter, the posterior digastric. So it comes here like this, and then this one's going to cover it. Kind of split and go around it. Let's see if I have a... So you can tell when you look up here what you're looking at, because it comes from the stylo process, goes to the tongue, styloglossus. Comes from the stylo process, goes to the hyoid bone, stylohyoid. Okay? Comes from the mastoid process, which is posterior, going to be behind the styloid. This would be the posterior digastric. The best model we have, well, let me write the name on it first here. The best model we have to show this is a cutaway on the smaller torso. So that same one where I showed you the styloglossus, on that same view, right here you can see styloglossus going to the tongue, stylohyoid going more inferior, and posterior digastric right behind it. Okay, so if you want to take a snapshot with your cell phones afterwards during lab, that one has that view that you can see up on the screen. All right, so if you want to take a picture, go ahead, because now after this we're going to look at infrahyoid. So these are suprahyoid. They're going to either pull the hyoid bone up or pull the mandible down. So I'm going to erase this and put the hyoid at the top of